The Square Ball Podcast.
Propaganda is brought to you by Levi Solicitors. 10% off your legal fees at levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. Dan, Michael and Rob with you today on the podcast where we find out what's been said about Leeds United, both by you and the opposition fans. You can also watch this on YouTube if you're listening to the audio version and vice versa. First, we're going to get the Leeds United fan opinion. Our TSB Plus subscribers sent us their feedback on the match ball for the Southampton game, which, let's be honest, was a low point. Before we get into that, we should say that Moscow is not here today. Rob, you are sitting in for Moscow.
No pressure.
We've taken his phone off him.
Yeah, because there was a lot of unhappiness at his silence in the early minutes of the match ball. So he has been referred to HR for performance review, and we'll let you know how that gets on.
It's Tyler Roberts I feel sorry for. Who's going to be there to defend him relentlessly in the face of all evidence?
There was a funny comment on Wacko, and I haven't got it in front of me, the webpage, to say it at the minute, but somebody said that Tyler Roberts should come on here to defend Moscow's performance on the match ball at the weekend. So, yeah, we miss you, big guy. Right, okay, what should we talk about then? The feedback we received from TSB Plus subscribers on what was a very difficult day, Saturday. How should we do this? Because it was miserable, wasn't it? It was a very, very miserable experience, to the point where actually the monetization, like the ads on YouTube, it was flagged up for inappropriate content. And I don't know if that's because we were so depressing, and it might have been because you suggested people go and imbibe alcohol.
Possibly
to excess. I don't know if that was.
There was a fair bit of swearing on it, I think, as well, which may have been an issue.
But I appealed it, and it got unred flagged, which was good. A human looked at it, not just the algorithm. Right, so I think we should start with, where is it? I'm scrolling down all the... Oh, God, that's miserable. So's that. Let's have a look.
I mean,
where was the one? We were too positive.
I mean, Phil watched that.
There we go.
Phil watched the match ball and decided that we'd obviously been on the happy pills. The team and game was dire. I mean, I don't know which bit of that he watched or listened to and went... Those guys are having a great time. That was overwhelmingly positive. Tell it how it really is. I mean, yeah, I didn't think there was anything positive.
No redeeming features for the first time in a long time.
I gave it a listen, and it was one of those weekends where I was like, right, that's enough football for the weekend now. I'm just going to turn my phone off, not look at the internet, and pretend that football doesn't exist, because that makes me much happier.
I'm never going to go woe is me about this, because it's great to do this, but you do have to accept like the rough with the smooth. And the last thing I wanted to do after that game was talk about it or dwell on it for the weekend, because it did completely ruin my Sunday. Despite me knowing it's just a silly football match, I was in a really foul mood on Sunday, and I couldn't shake it.
Should have done what Moscow did and just play a game on your phone for 10 minutes.
Straight under the bus now. He's not here.
I know. I think Moscow's problem, in fairness, is captured by the lack of positives that people were able to isolate, in that he's generally the one that you look to to find something good in Tyler Roberts. But I think he was left devoid of anything on the weekend.
There was very little to cling on to, was there, that one. Let's run through some of the headlines then, because we divide these up into sections on our notes. I mean, you can't see them, but let's just hold it up for... Where's Rob's camera? There we go. Look. What should we talk about? How bad we were is the top one. Who do we blame? People now worried. Energy levels, lack of depth. We're already relegated. That'll be a good one. We'll start with that. Second season syndrome. Missing personalities. Rodrigo. Our lack of midfield. Back three. Bielsa. We do have a positive or two there. Transfer business. And Hilton Crowther is back from beyond the grave, suggesting the Eddie solution is the right one, which is put Jacko in and play the kids. Panic by Lewis O'Brien and Che Adams in January.
Get John Kivin Augustin back. That's what I say. Sorry, buy him for the first time. Have a look at him. He's probably cheaper now than when we first...
Would he be better than Rodrigo?
It's a good question.
Do you know what? I really like Rodrigo. Let's be positive, right? Okay, we've got two ways we can approach this podcast. We can wallow in it more, or we can be really positive. Rodrigo, he's a dead nice guy.
How do you know?
You can just tell, can't you?
I saw him in Armley setting fire to cats.
Really?
No, that's not true, obviously. Yeah, he seems nice, doesn't he?
Yeah, nice guy. Very, very gentle personality.
There's a bit of an issue I mean, I'm well, actually, I'm not that nice. I'm fairly nice, but would you want me playing up front for Leeds United at the moment?
You might have been more effective on Saturday than.
Well, that's the thing.
Than those chumps.
What could I have done worse? Would be the issue. He barely touched it, did he? Was the main problem.
I mean, you got into the point in the last 5 minutes of the game of counting the touches, not manually. I mean, you went to a stats website.
Yeah, I think he'd had 22 touches.
But to be fair, one thing we didn't mention, I mean, and James and Ant both pick out Rodrigo, and actually there is apology contained within this. Like Ant even says he hates to jump on the bandwagon, and trying to be a fan of his, it just didn't show up with anything. But there was no service, was there, at all? Like, I think the problem was probably the total lack of outball from defence into midfield, and what midfield. They were pretty woeful on Saturday.
I have written an article for the blog comparing this defeat at Southampton, because there was all this talk of where does it rank among Bielsa's worst performances. It's right up there. It's the worst we've ever played. And I don't know, you don't have to go that far back to find us playing that badly. And I compared it to the Brighton game at the end of last season when we went there and there was no Phillips, there was no Rafinha. We were terrible. Bamford played up front that day and he had 15 touches, which was even fewer than Rodrigo in an hour, and he got hooked off. And it was pretty rank. The Southampton game was very much of a muchness in that case. And actually, I think the one brief glimmer of hope I take out of it is that the way Bielsa responded to that Brighton game was he picked the exact same team against Tottenham, and they were brilliant. So these don't just become bad players overnight. That doesn't mean they can't play badly like as they did at the weekend.
So you promise they're going to play well?
Right. I don't want to promise it, but that's about as positive as I've got.
But you're right, though. Based on historic evidence, there is a positive reaction in this somewhere, you'd hope.
It's the overall context of it, isn't it? Like that Brighton game came at a time when we were fairly all right in the league. We'd played well in fairly recent memory. Things didn't feel like they were dropping apart in quite the same ways that they do now. But I mean, we went into the international break and we were all giddy off a win. We were seeing Rafinha being brilliant, and it was like, oh, well, this is all going to be fine. Then we turned up on at Southampton, and Christ, we were like, all the problems we'd more or less forgotten about for a week were so evident.
You know, when we played Brighton, was that off the back of an international break or going into one?
I couldn't remember now. That was the game where everyone was like, right, Alioski needs to go. That was sort of his one of just...
We're missing him now, though, aren't we, Rob? We're missing him.
Well, where's Firpo, exactly? Where's our replacement? But yeah, then, like you say, we were a lot more forgiving, and I listened back to that podcast, and even you were talking about Bamford, and you were saying, well, he just didn't get any service, so that's kind of... It's not really his fault, whereas with Rodrigo, it's very much the opposite reaction. I think the problem we've got is that everyone was saying, well, he's not a number 10, so he needs to play number 9. He's played number 9. He had a couple of good games, but he's not scored, and then he has a game like that, and he just doesn't have the credit in the bank, does he, yet? No. Which I think is the problem. That
was the thing Bamford used to struggle with until last season. Even when he played well and did something, he never did it quite consistently enough or scored enough goals in the Championship that when he had a bad game, people were willing to accept it. It was always like, well, someone else would be doing a better job than this. And then last year, he essentially just got rid of that entirely because he started the season well and played well throughout. And he's reached a point now where he can have bad games and fans can stomach it. Whereas with Rodrigo, people are sort of at the end of their tether with him to a large extent at the moment, because they just... The thing was that he's not had a chance in the team, and now he's got one, and it's just not working at the moment.
I think it's quite telling as well that Bielsa's quite quick to sub him off at times. He's been taken off at half-time quite a bit. Even though we had a pretty weak bench at the weekend, it was, was it just after an hour he went off? It was like, well, it's not working, so we're going to have to change it.
Yeah, Brighton, there was no international break. We played Man United on the 25th of April, drew 0-0 at home, and then we went there on the 1st of May and lost 2-0. So that's that theory out of the window.
But 0-0 against Man United was a good performance and a good result. So you go away and you lose, and it's we were already very comfortable in the league at that point, weren't we? It was all fine. Whereas as it is, we're looking at being a Newcastle win away from relegation zones.
But also we're only one win away from being 14th.
You don't look that way, do you? When things are going badly, you only look down.
Well, Roger suggests that we need to get used to what this is going to be like. He said, need to get a foretaste of how we'll line up next season when Rafinha and Phillips are sold. Hundreds of millions wasted on Costa, Casilla, Augustin, Rodrigo, Koch, James, but still stuck with a tired Championship midfield. Perhaps it is just that the money's not being entirely wasted on all those players, but we still just do need a midfielder. I would argue that.
The Victor Orta angle on it is weird, because I feel like 6 months ago, everyone was saying how brilliantly we'd done to not get Ben White, and instead we've got Llorente and we've got Koch, and we've made some really good investments in, like, Meslier has been a brilliant signing for the money, and it feels like that's now almost flipping back, where people are saying, well, he's just bought all these shit injured players. What the fuck? What's he actually doing? He needs to go as well. And it's like, well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, in that obviously we should have bought a central midfielder, and the club know we should have bought a central midfielder, because we tried to sign a year ago Cuisance, we tried to get Gallagher, we tried to get O'Brien from Huddersfield.
Keep failing though, don't we, Michael? That's the point.
Well, that's the thing, but they're aware of the issue, and the fact we haven't signed it is definitely on the club.
It's a failing, isn't it? But
it is.
I'd like to know why we haven't. I'd like to understand more about the dynamic of player recruitment. I mean, we had Victor Orta in here and spoke to him and didn't really get a proper chance to kind of get too much into that granular side of things, but he did say, they've got like they narrow it down to 2 or 3 targets for each position. It does beg the question as to why they've not been able to address that in 2 consecutive summers, and then obviously they don't like doing business in January, but who knows if maybe they'll act this time, because I just think we need an extra body in there.
I think Bielsa's influence on it all is kind of a strength and a weakness. Like, when he's talking about he wants a small squad and he has a certain value of a player, and I like those things about him. And if the club's approach is to invest in the under-23s and for Bielsa to develop them, then again, like I can see the logic in that. But the problem is if Bielsa's talking about, well, he don't want to play these young players in pressurised situations, that's why he wants his senior players to stand up.
But they're all broken, Rob.
But this is the thing, which was the case with Cresswell and Llorente coming back in. But then when you look at the bench at the weekend, and the senior players are injured, and we just got a bench full of kids, when it is a pressure situation and we need to go for a win, you can't change it then. It's just a bit of a punt and hopeful, and it all gets a bit gloomy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, isn't it, hoping that Joffrey's going to rescue things for you in his first Premier League appearance.
And even with Forshaw coming on, that he probably is what we kind of needed, but a guy who's not played a league game for 2 years, it felt like he just looked at the bench and was like, well, he's the senior player, so it'll have to be him, and hopefully it'll work. But
Costa Blanca actually on the feedback picked us up saying, sorry lads, but after sitting through 90 minutes of that, I couldn't appreciate the Forshaw praise. He wasn't good enough in the Championship, and he isn't good enough now. The man underhit every pass he tried. I don't think it was praise of his performance necessarily. It's just that I feel like when he came on, there was at least someone stood in that space in front of the defence to take passes, even though he then
gave it away.
He'd get it.
But he wouldn't be the first to do that.
But it was telling, I think, that it felt like we were almost in better shape with him on there, stood there receiving passes and not doing anything with it, than just watching the defence
hoof it aimlessly,
into a void of nothingness in front of them.
He also spoke about that, didn't he? He was saying we were going wide too quickly and we didn't have options in the middle to play through the centre of the pitch. So I guess that's where Forshaw comes into it. But yeah, I guess you sort of going back to the Rads tweet there as well, aren't you?
Yes. It was interesting seeing Moscow actually, God rest his soul, diving into Hasenhüttl's tactical approach and finding reports about how he sets his teams up.
Once he worked out which half it was.
Yeah, to crush teams out wide, which is where we tend to play. So he just got the upper hand in that regard, didn't he? I mean, we did say going into this, I think it was on the Phil Hay show last week, talking about the back three, and Craig and Daniel both picked out the back three as an issue this time. Anybody who plays 2 strikers against us automatically causes us a massive problem, because our players never look good in that formation, do they? And it impacts midfield so much, particularly when Calvin's not there.
I think that's the thing, when you've got 3 actual centre-backs doing that system, they all play at centre-back, which is why you have the gap whereas Calvin knows sometimes to drop, sometimes to push forward and receive the ball. I mean, Calvin's just really good. It's the actual problem we have, because when he's not in the side, there's no one even vaguely approaching his level in that position. So, and it was a very weakened side, I think it's worth saying. It's probably as weakened, I think it's probably weaker than any team we had to field last season, unless someone can tell me otherwise. But it feels, if you go through it and look at players who were first choice, played in their first choice position, you're probably looking at Meslier, Llorente and Cooper. Is that it? Oh, Jack Harrison, I suppose.
I guess. I don't know, because again, going back to that Tottenham game, we beat them with midfield of Robin Koch, Tyler Roberts and Matthias Klick, and that's like the triangle of doom, isn't it? If you'd ask most fans, and it kind of worked. But it is, I think, yeah, like you say, with the back three, when Phillips isn't there, it's like, well, how do we get the ball forward, which is the massive problem. The back three itself, I hated it in Bielsa's first season. I thought it was really counterproductive, and I found it quite strange. But then I think we have got better with each season. But then it does seem to have become stunted this season. But again, I don't know if that's just we need our best player to be playing, and then everything looks nicer.
Yeah, I was going to say, you put you put Rafinha into that and Phillips, and it is a completely different game you would expect from our point of view, wouldn't you? But that then terrifies everybody into an over-reliance on the good players and just going, well, they're going to be sold anyway. So
the fact is, though, if people saying, it's a glimpse of the future if we lose Phillips and Rafinha, but the truth is, if they leave, we'll have like £200 million to spend, and you would imagine we'll buy some footballers, and hopefully ones that aren't just perennially injured.
Yeah. Is there? I mean, this is I didn't even ask it, but are we seeing evidence 3 years down the line of maybe Bielsa's methods being a bit too much, do you think? And I ask that completely. I love the man. I would never turn on him, but I'm just playing devil's advocate and asking the question because we've had 3 seasons now where we've been hammered by injuries and the thin squad has exposed us terribly at times. Is it a problem?
I don't want to say.
It's one of the not great unspoken things. It's one of those fears, isn't it? The thing is with Bielsa's thin squad approach and insistence on using the 23s is that it's not a problem until it becomes a problem, if that makes sense.
Part of the issue, I think, is that because of Bielsa's methods, what would be called a dip in form elsewhere becomes a narrative around having burnt out, and because his methods are so distinct. If he was, if we'd appointed Eddie Howe and had him in charge for the rest of the season and played badly, people would just go, oh, they're just not playing very well. Whereas as it is with Bielsa, everyone goes, oh, well, they must be tired or whatever. Whereas like Jack Harrison was rubbish. It's as bad as he's played in months, years on the weekend.
That is the thing, though, isn't it? Everybody's out of form, and that's what's worrying.
But Jack Harrison, he'd not been away on international break. He should have been as rested as he ever is with his constant exercising with his incredible girlfriend and his dog. But I'm sure he will have had a bit of a break by Leeds United standards. But what happened to him? Like, he couldn't control a ball, which is unheard of from Jack Harrison. There were times where he came to him and he was Luke Varney-esque in his touch.
But with all of those days, maybe you'll be, I don't know if you're playing 5-a-side with your mates, or whether you played like 11-a-side or something like that, where it just all goes wrong, where nothing works. It's just worrying that they're professional footballers on tens of thousands of pounds a week and they encounter those problems, isn't it? I don't know. But yeah, but the thing is, you're always looking for big answers, and that's, I guess, what we've got here in the form of all these little headlines, like Bielsa is picked out by Kit, Steve and Ryan. Ryan's asking, do we think the players are no longer playing for the manager? No, I don't think so. I mean, Ryan suggests they looked as if they couldn't care less. Has there been a bust-up or an unwillingness to change tactics that's costing them? Or is it just that sometimes it doesn't work?
I think also, I bet it's probably really, really hard to work under Bielsa and play for him. Like, it's not easy. You've got to do a lot of work, and it's really tiring. And then
it's really hard to win. It's hard to win football matches.
You've got to play football really well in the Premier League against other good footballers, and sometimes you don't, and you get beat. I think, like you said, Michael, it tends to be just one extreme or the other with us, where you watch us against Watford and you think, I know they're kind of rubbish, but you think, God, we're brilliant, and we just absolutely suffocated them. But then you watch us against Southampton when that isn't happening, and it looks, they're just passing the ball into touch and not controlling it, and it's just veering from one side to the other.
It's funny, isn't it? All the existential terror that grips us when we were in the Championship for so long, and ultimately we got into a headspace where we couldn't be in that division because it was so bad for us in terms of all our individual mental health and also like the health of the club as a whole. There's also a bit of you thinks we can't be hanging around at this bottom end of the table because that's not good for us either, is it? It feels like we need to be mid-table at minimum just so we can all breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, some of the teams as well that were meant to be doing badly and be with us down there are kind of doing all right now. Like Palace, at the start of the season, I thought, I won't be surprised if they were...
They've only won one game.
Have they?
Yeah.
Oh, they won last night, didn't they?
No, they drew 2-2.
Oh, was it draw in the end?
95th minute equaliser.
Oh, what a great bunch of lads Arsenal. I didn't see that. I'll be honest, I saw them I saw them winning in the last minute, so I assume they had. Yeah, okay, well, that's good. But like Wolves have picked up form, as we'll come on to in a bit, and I don't know, I suppose I expected there to be a couple more teams.
I can't work whether it's good or bad that Watford are above us. Because I think, well, surely we'll finish above them. They're terrible. Yeah. But then at the same time, it's like, well, they have won a game more than us, which is kind of worrying.
With the exception that Watford have won 2 games, but Palace are in 14th and they've only won 1 match. Southampton have won 1 match, and so have we. Burnley, Newcastle and Norwich all still to win a match. So as long as we get our asses in gear soon, we'll be fine.
I mean, Newcastle are a bit of an issue in so far as everyone expects them to drop like £1 billion in January, which may see them clear of trouble. But it may not.
I think they'll probably spend some. They'll probably drop 40 million on Tarkowski. because there'll be the Newcastle tax on top of everything, and it'll make them marginally better. But I think they're in a world of trouble. I also think Brentford could.
Nah, Brentford will be fine.
Could
they
get
look really good.
Yeah, all they need to do is go on a bad run of form, though, don't they? Mind you, they've got 12 points, which feels like loads. But if they have a bad run, Wolves could easily get pulled back into it because they either win or lose. 4 of each they've got at the minute. So, Leicester, they've only won 3 games. So all it takes is a win or 2 in this division to settle the nerves, doesn't it? I think that's just all we need to do is just calm down a little bit.
Looking at the rest of the Premier League does help.
Yeah.
You think, no, there's not that many people. I think just being competent and sensible gets you a long way in the Premier League, and there's not that many clubs that you think, yeah, they've got a grand plan that they're going to stick to, and there's loads of logic to it and it's going to work. I mean, with Newcastle as well, the thing that gives me hope with them is Amanda Staveley coming in and saying that they've not spoken or thought about any of the performance staff, and they've not spoken to him, and they're still trying to work out. And you think, well, this takeover's been going on for ages, and you've still not worked out that Steve Bruce is like useless. Like, come on.
I expected him to get sacked this week. I expected him to get sacked immediately after the Spurs game, but it does suggest there's not necessarily a massive plan in place. You're right, I do.
And I guess it is fairly difficult trying to get a manager mid-season, as proven by the fact they're apparently going to get Lampard, which
you're looking for somebody who's out of work.
It seems like a appalling choice, I would suggest.
But the longer Bruce stays there as well, because let's make no bones about it. Apart from that opening section against Spurs and then the late rally when they'd scored again, they were terrible, weren't they?
Didn't watch it. I was ignoring all football by that point. So
fair point. But it does give me hope that there are a lot, like you say, a lot of woeful teams in the Premier League. We just need to be not the most woeful.
I mean, on the Bielsa burnout thing, a few people did pick up on the general energy levels and Paul saying what's happened to our high energy and pressing game, and that did seem to be lacking. I do wonder if it's partly a structural thing of not having players in the right positions. So maybe you're expecting, like, maybe the part of that back three, maybe one of them doesn't quite know when to press or when to break that three to push forward in the way that Calvin does. He seems to just instinctively know where to be and when to apply pressure. And if one person, the thing with applying pressure is once you do it to one person, it then makes people rush passes, and then everyone else's pressing works better. And it can be a bit of a system success or a system failure, can't it, in the way it works? And I think that's what we saw at Southampton, is that they just had the better of us with it this weekend.
I think maybe you have to credit them a little bit as well, because the start doing the rounds was that it was the first time we'd been out round under Bielsa for however long, and so maybe it was kind of a bit of them making us look a bit more sluggish than we used to as well. It'll be interesting to see how they get on next week, whether there's that championship drop off of when teams would raise the games to play against us and then we're knackered afterwards. And I'm also really interested to know what kind of week the Leeds players have at training, if they've been outran in a game, and whether Bielsa just doubles down and beasts them up.
Well, let's finish this on a positive or two then. Matt, Nathan and Carl all trying to be positive.
God bless you.
Carrying the torch for Moscow. Carl thought, match ball was pretty much spot on. Good. Did disagree that the defence was bad, as we didn't concede a lot of big chances, and that wasn't bad considering how anonymous the midfield was. Thought we defended fine in the main. I'm not sure we ever criticised the defence, did we?
I don't know. I suppose we looked a bit stretched, but you're going to be, aren't you, when there's no one in front of you?
Yeah, there's nothing going forward. So let's assume we were right there and Carl's wrong. Nathan said, forget about it. Move on. We're not Norwich, Watford or Burnley, who are 3 teams that will finish below us this season. There's a confident man.
Yeah, we'll probably be fine. Maybe. I mean, Matt's positive was that they're meant to be good at set pieces, and we handled them okay. I mean, they did nearly score from a couple. There was the one where I can't remember, it was someone there was a near post flick, and then someone at the back post kind of Supermaned in and just missed it. So they had a couple of chances. And also, the reason they're good at set pieces is because of James Ward-Prowse, who wasn't playing.
Great.
So that probably helped. So apart from those ones, maybe that helped a bit. I don't know. But yeah, that was a great positive. But let's not do a back three again, ever.
That wraps up the Leeds fan feedback on this part of the video. Tune into the next bit, available on YouTube, where you'll find out what the opposition fans were thinking about Saturday's game. Although it's going to be quite light on Southampton.
Yeah, no one wants to hear it, do they? So we're just going to try and listen to other people's misery instead.
That wraps up the Leeds fan feedback on this part of the video. Tune into the next bit, available on YouTube, where you'll find out what the opposition fans were thinking about Saturday's game. Although it's going to be quite light on Southampton.
Yeah, no one wants to hear it, do they? So we're just going to try and listen to other people's misery instead.
The Square Ball Podcast.